looking to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on tonight's headlines. Rescuers are searching for survivors buried under rubble after an earthquake on Indonesia's main island of Java killed 162, injuring hundreds and left more feared trapped in collapsed buildings. FIVOC said that there was no tsunami threat to the Philippines following a magnitude 7 earthquake that occurred on Solomon Islands. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris visited Palawan near waters claimed by China to show support for the longtime U.S. ally and counter Beijing's growing influence in the region. The trial of 2 Uyghurs accused of carrying out a deadly bomb attack in Bangkok in 2015 resumed today after years of delays due to coronavirus disruptions and problems securing translators. First in our news to Indonesia, where rescuers are now searching for survivors buried under rubble after an earthquake on the main island of Java killed 162, injuring hundreds and left more feared trapped in collapsed buildings. A shallow 5.6 magnitude earthquake killed at least 162, with hundreds injured when it toppled buildings and triggered landslides on Indonesia's main island of Java. Let's take a look.
Desa Padaluyu, Kecamatan Cipinang, di sana banyak rumah yang hancur, memerlukan alat berat, dan juga banyak jalan-jalan yang terputus sehingga kami terputus. Nah, kondisi sekarang saya sedang menginventarisasi, dan juga tidak sedikit warga yang meninggal. Barusan informasi dari BPBD, gempa susulan sudah 4 kali, sehingga tidak mungkin, mudah-mudahan tidak terjadi lagi gempa yang sebesar, sehingga relatif aman bisa
Sejauh ini sudah ada kurang lebih 100 korban yang datang ke rumah sakit, yang meninggal sudah ada 8 orang. Tenaga medis sekarang ini semua tenaga medis di Rumah Sakit Cimacan yang di luar dinas itu sudah datang. Oh, gitu? Jadi insya Allah sudah bisa. Yang di luar dinas itu maksudnya kan kita semua pakai shift ya. Oh. Ya sih, yang kondisinya sedang libur, yang lepas shift itu semua sudah datang ke rumah sakit untuk membantu. Tempatan sudah aman, dinas kesehatan juga sudah mensupport. Mungkin yang ditakutkan hanya jangan sampai ada gempa susulan gitu saja.
Doctors treated patients outdoors after the quake, which was felt as far away as the capital, Jakarta. It left hospitals in the West Java town of Cianjur without power for several hours. The BNBP said 25 people remained trapped under the rubble as the rescue mission stretched into the night. The agency also said more than 2,000 houses were damaged, and officials said more than 13,000 people were taken to evacuation centers. The afternoon quake was centered in the Cianjur region, and local authorities earlier said as many as 700 had been wounded, warning the death toll could rise further. The majority of deaths were counted in one hospital, according to the head of Cianjur's local administration, Herman Suherman, with most of the victims killed in the ruins of collapsed buildings. He told the Indonesian media the town's Sayang hospital had no power after the quake, leaving doctors unable to operate on victims immediately. More health workers were urgently needed due to the overwhelming number of patients. They were placed in front of the facility as residents spread a tarpaulin on the road for the bodies. At another facility, Simakan Hospital, green tents were erected outside for makeshift treatment, according to an AFP reporter at the scene. victims arrived covered in blood while parents looked for their children. Camille, the governor, said multiple landslides had cut off road access to some areas and bulldozers were being used to reopen them. Shops, a hospital, and an Islamic boarding school in the town were severely damaged, according to Indonesian media. Collapsed buildings and debris line the streets in Cianjur, and the town is situated in a hilly area where many houses are built with a mixture of mud and concrete. Indonesia's meteorological agency said it recorded 62 aftershocks in Cianjur after the quake, with magnitudes ranging from 1.8 to 4. And there were no reports of casualties or more damage in Jakarta, a 3-hour drive away. Meanwhile, rescuers are still searching today for more survivors buried under the rubble after this strong earthquake in the main island of Java that injured hundreds and left more feared trapped in collapsed buildings. Again, let's listen in.
Nah, posisinya gini Pak, kalau kita di sana itu menghambat untuk evakuasi gitu kan. Evakuasi korban-korban bencana longsor.
Jalannya juga rusak?
Jalannya rusak. Keduanya kita juga nggak bisa lewat karena kemungkinan data-data yang kita dapat itu tertimbunnya jalan itu hampir 50 meter.
Kita keluar ke depan semuanya.
Ke depan semuanya. Mengungsi di sini kenapa karena nggak ada tempat yang lain atau gimana?
Banyak di belakang di sawah tapi jauh. Jauh. Di sini kan takut rumah.
Ibu khawatir ada longsor susulan makanya mengungsi di sini.
Ya.
The epicenter of the shallow 5.6 magnitude quake was near the town of Cianjur in Indonesia's most populous province, West Java, where most of the victims were killed when buildings fell and landslides triggered. Some of the dead were students at an Islamic boarding school, while others were killed in their own homes when roofs and walls fell in on them. The search operation was made more challenging because of severe or severed road links and power supply in parts of the largely rural mountainous region. On Tuesday, today, dozens of rescuers were using heavy machinery in Kuginang village to try and clear the road to Cianjur, which was cut off by a landslide. As the body bags emerged from crumpled buildings, the focus is now turned to the missing and any survivors under the debris. Indonesia's National Disaster Mitigation Agency, or BNBP, said at least 25 more people were still buried under the rubble in Cianjur as darkness fell on Monday. And those who survived camped outside in near total darkness. The Disaster Mitigation Agency said more than 2,000 houses were damaged, and West Java Governor Riwandin Kamil said more than 13,000 people were taken to evacuation centers. The devastation caused by the quake was made worse by a wave of 62 smaller aftershocks with magnitudes of ranging from 1.8 to 4 that kept shaking Cianjur, a town of about 175,000 people. Leaders from France and Canada offered their condolences on Monday evening. Meanwhile, FIVOC said that there was no tsunami threat to the Philippines following a magnitude 7 earthquake that occurred on Solomon Islands. FIVOC said that hazardous tsunami waves are possible for coasts located within 300 kilometers of the earthquake's epicenter. A 7.0 magnitude earthquake struck the Solomon Islands today, with eyewitnesses reporting violent shaking that hurled items to the ground and knocked out power in parts of the capital, Honiara. An AFP reporter in Honiara said the shaking lasted for around 20 seconds, and there were no immediate reports of serious structural damage. But power was out in some areas of the city, and people were rushing from their offices and fleeing to higher ground. The USGS revised the earthquake's magnitude down from an initial 7.3. The quake struck at a relatively shallow depth of 10 kilometers just off the southwest coast of Guadalcanal Island. A tsunami warning had been issued for an area of the Solomon's coast within 300 kilometers of the epicenter. But the UN-backed Pacific Warning Center later said the threat had largely passed. Solomon Islands authorities also said the tsunami threat had passed but urged caution. In tonight's other news, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris today visited a Philippine island near waters claimed by China to show support for the longtime U.S. ally and to counter Beijing's growing influence in the region. Chinese state outlet Global Times today accused Vice President Harris of fanning the flames of the South China Sea. It said the Philippines has the right to receive any foreign visitor. What we want to emphasize is that any bilateral exchanges should not be at the expense of the interests of any third country as well as regional peace and stability, it said in its editorial. Vice President Harris's trip to Palawan comes a day after she held talks with Philippine President Marcos Jr. in Manila. She also reaffirmed the U.S.'s unwavering commitment to defending the Philippines if its vessels or aircraft were attacked in the South China Sea. Washington has a decades-old security alliance with the country, and that includes a mutual defense treaty and a 2014 pact known by the acronym EDCA, which allows for the U.S. military to store defense equipment and supplies on 5 Philippine bases. It also allows U.S. troops to rotate through those military bases. And we'll bring you more news as we follow this developing story. Now, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris also said lifting the economic status of women benefits society. Vice President Harris met with Filipino women as part of her visit to the country in a town hall meeting with women leaders, youth and civil society organizations. Vice President Harris highlighted the importance of access to capital, equal access to financial literacy, and all opportunities critical to give women a good idea, vision, and a plan to thrive. Let's listen in.
I think we all know, and I feel very strongly, you lift up the economic status of a woman, her family will be lifted, her community will be lifted, all of society will benefit. Lift up the economic status of women and all of society benefits. So among the rights that I believe that people have is the right to be free from violence, to be free from fear, those things that will be an impediment to growth, to success, to having dreams, to having vision. So when we connect these issues, there is the connection between what should be a human right to live free from fear, to live in a safe situation.
The meeting came as the U.S. announced its plan to invest in Filipino women entrepreneurs. According to a White House fact sheet dated November 21, the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation will provide $15.5 million loan guarantee through a framework agreement with Citibank to support ASA Philippines Foundation, a microfinance institution helping women entrepreneurs access capital and contribute to economic growth in the country. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met his Chinese counterpart Wei Fenghe in Cambodia today as the two sides move to keep tensions in check. The meeting on the sidelines of a conference of defense ministers in Siem Reap is the first between Austin and Wei since June, before a visit by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan sparked fury in Beijing. But China and the U.S. have since moved to lower the temperature with meetings between top officials. On November 14, President Joe Biden and President Xi Jinping met for 3 hours at a Group of 20 summit in Bali, the first in-person talks between the leaders of the world's 2 largest economies since they each became president. And that was followed by a meeting between Xi and U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris at an Asia-Pacific summit in Bangkok. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met his Indonesian counterpart to push stronger defense ties. Secretary Austin discussed with Indonesian counterparts a range of bilateral security initiatives, including force modernization, professional military education, and cooperation in the maritime domain. The leaders agreed to expand bilateral military training and education, including through hosting new language training courses, expanding cooperation for emerging defense leaders, and enhancing combined exercises such as the Garuda Shield, one of the department's largest multinational exercises in the Indo-Pacific. Secretary Austin's visit reaffirmed the U.S.'s commitment to partnering with Indonesia, a regional leader, to advance their shared vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. Now, this visit comes amid growing Chinese naval activity in the Indo-Pacific region. In other news, the trial of two Uyghurs accused of carrying out a deadly bomb attack in Bangkok in 2015 resumed today after years of delays due to coronavirus disruptions and problems securing translators. Yusufu Meriali and Bilal Mohammed allegedly planted a bomb in a Hindu shrine in Bangkok's commercial heart in August 2015 that left 20 dead, mostly Chinese tourists. The blast came weeks after Thailand's junta forcibly repatriated 109 Uyghurs to China, where rights activists say the Muslim minority faces cultural and religious repression. The timing prompted speculation that the attack was part of a revenge plot against a country that had been a key transit hub for Uyghurs as Thailand's then military leaders grew closer to Beijing. The trial for the two men has been delayed several times as the court struggled to find a suitable translator, but a hearing resumed Tuesday in Bangkok. Uyghurs, a Turkic minority, hail from China's westernmost province of Xinjiang. China has been accused of grave human rights abuses in Xinjiang against the Uyghurs dating back to at least the 1990s, with the U.S. branding Beijing's treatment of the mostly Muslim minority a genocide, which China denies. In other news, Japanese journalist Toru Kubota says he is grateful to be back home after being freed by Myanmar's junta in an amnesty releasing almost 6,000 prisoners. Kubota was detained on July 30 while filming a protest against the military, which seized power from the democratically elected government in a February 2021 coup. Let's listen in.
何よりも感謝を申し上げたいです。10年という判決が下されました。これまで3ヶ月と半陰線刑務所の中で過ごしまして、こんなに早く釈放されることができたのは紛れもなく日本でこのように支援してくださった一人一人の方々とメディア関係者の報道してくれた方々と政府解放に向けて常に尽力してくださった方々のおかげだと思っております。その点において本当に言葉では言い表せないほど感謝を感じています。
The Japanese journalist, 26 years old, was detained in July near an anti-government rally in Yangon, along with two Myanmar citizens. The filmmaker was sentenced to 10 years in jail for 2 charges on October 6, found guilty of violating Myanmar's electronic transactions law with a charge of 7 years in prison, as well as a further 3 for incitement, 10 in all. Kubota was serving his sentence at insane prison in Yangon, which is notorious for inhumane conditions and mistreatment and torture of inmates. Kubota is one of 4 foreign prisoners who were released by Myanmar authorities as part of a broad prisoner amnesty that also freed many local citizens held for protesting the army takeover. It was announced to mark the country's National Victory Day. In the related news, an Australian economist released last week after nearly 2 years at a Myanmar jail, today told of interrogations in leg irons, squalor, and the sounds of screams from tortured cellmates. Sean Turnell, who returned home to Sydney on Friday after being released as part of an amnesty of almost 6,000 prisoners, gave the first public details of his incarceration in an interview with the Australian newspaper. The former advisor to deposed Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi was detained by the military in February 2021, shortly after its forces seized control of the country. Turnell told the paper he was initially kept at Yangon's insane prison in a 6-meter by 2.5-meter concrete cell in which an iron chair with leg irons had been bolted to the floor. He then endured 2 months of interrogations, according to the paper, sometimes being taken away from his bed to be locked in the irons. He told the paper he was infected with COVID-19 5 times and kept in solitary confinement for months. Turnell said he had expected to be treated with kid gloves. They didn't stick electrodes to me, but I was thrown into filthy cells. The food they used to deliver to me came in a bucket. For 650 days, he said, I ate out of a bucket. In the Naypyidaw Detention Center, to which he was later transferred, it wasn't even a new bucket, he said. They were paint buckets. They didn't beat me, but they did push and shove me, he said. In Naypyidaw, Turnell said prisoners were locked away for 20 hours a day. Turnell said his wife, Havu, an economist at Australia's Macquarie University, helped him survive with phone chats and by regularly sending books, cookies, and cake through the Australian embassy. The economist was sentenced in September to 3 years imprisonment for breaching Myanmar's Official Secrets Act, charges he denied before being released in last week's amnesty, along with former British Ambassador Vicky Bowman and Japanese journalist Toru Kubota. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken welcomed the prisoner release but said there was no sign the junta was opening up. Take a look.
It is the one, I would say, bright spot in what is otherwise an incredibly dark time, where we see things going from bad to worse in Burma.
Amnesty International's regional office spokesperson said thousands of people jailed since the coup in Myanmar have done nothing wrong and should never have been imprisoned in the first place. More than 2,300 civilians have been killed since the military's crackdown on dissent after it ousted Suu Kyi's government, according to a Myanmar monitoring group. The junta blames anti-coup fighters for the deaths of almost 3,900 civilians. In other news, Disney ousted Chief Executive Bob Chapek on Sunday and announced that it had brought back former CEO Bob Iger to once again take the reins. The board of directors decided that as the company embarks on an increasingly complex period of industry transformation, Bob Iger is uniquely situated to lead. Chapek spent 2 years as CEO, a period that saw Wall Street concerned about rising expenses at the company. Disney stock has fallen 41% this year. Under Iger's leadership, Disney acquired Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, and 21st Century Fox. It also opened its first theme park in China, the Shanghai Disney Resort, and launched the Disney Plus and ESPN Plus streaming services. The core problem for Iger will be to turn a profit at Disney Plus when, according to the latest figures, in November, it burned through $4 billion in just 12 months. Launched in early 2020, Disney Plus streams all that the Star Wars and Marvel franchises and Disney have to offer, releasing new content at a furious rate, but that weighs heavily on finances. On the positive side, the Disney Plus platform continues to gain subscribers and had 164 million customers at the end of September. But a financial hole has put pressure on Disney's other sectors. Theme parks and merchandising have succeeded for now to keep the Disney Group in the green. Finally, growing fears about China's latest COVID outbreaks today rattled investors who fear authorities will revert to highly restrictive containment measures that have already dealt a chilling blow to the world's #2 economy this year. After starting November with a rally thanks to easing inflation concerns and signs that China was edging towards a looser approach to the disease, the optimism has been given a massive jolt since the country announced its first virus deaths in 6 months. The flare-ups come just a week after China said it would begin rolling back some of the strict COVID rules that have been in place since the pandemic started in 2020, even as the rest of the world has moved on. Hong Kong, which thundered more than 10% higher in a 3-day surge earlier this month, fell for a 5th straight day, while Shanghai was also lower, along with Seoul, Taipei, and Wellington. Still, there were gains in Tokyo, Sydney, Singapore, Manila, and Jakarta. And that came after a drop on Wall Street, where trading is lighter than usual owing to the Thanksgiving break at the end of the week. And as my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast of ASEAN and Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you back tomorrow. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.